in economics from Calcutta University. Thank you.
Hello. Hi everyone. I am Mansi Bish. Currently I'm pursuing Masters in Public Health from JSS Medical College. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rohit Shah. I have completed my graduation from Bharati Vidyapith University, Pune. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Manya and I'm doing my master's in gender studies from Tata Institute of Social Science, Mumbai. Thank you.
Hello everyone, good evening. So my name is Arsha Gupta. I am a BTech graduate and I'm currently pursuing Masters in Public Administration.
Hi, this is Anushka Singh. I have done my bachelor's in global studies from Ambedkar University, Delhi, and I'm currently going to pursue master's in international relations. Thank you.
Hello everyone.
If anybody is yet to introduce, please do go ahead. Then I'll hand it over to Pooja ma'am.
Hello everyone. I'm
Hello, my
Vaishnavi
name is
Navre.
Arjun.
Hello.
Go ahead. Hello, my name is Arjun Vij. I am a graduate in History Honours from Delhi University. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I'm Vaishnavi Navre, currently pursuing Masters in Economics from Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, Pune.
Good evening, everyone. I am Namrita and currently I am pursuing BCom LLB from St. Joseph College of Law, Bangalore. Thank you.
Hello everyone, this is Vamshi. I am currently pursuing BSc Honours Economics in Central University of Andhra Pradesh. Thank you.
I think everybody has done with their round of introductions. So I'd like to introduce Pooja ma'am to all of you. Dr. Pooja Jain is a passionate educator who believes in inclusive, diverse, and non-judgmental modes of imparting education. She teaches at Delhi College and has completed her PhD in English from Chhatrapati Sahuji Maharaj, Kanpur University. She is currently pursuing another PhD in education. We welcome you here, ma'am, and I would hand it over to you.
Thank you and good evening, everybody. I just felt a little uneasy and sick in the afternoon, so I might pant a little bit. Okay, it's terrible heat wave here, terrible heat wave. So I hope that I'm audible and clear.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am, audible.
great. So I've been reading your research topics and some questions that were floated around, and I was going through them. So I may not be able to answer all of those questions because some of those questions were at a higher stage also, you know. So to begin with, I will share a document with you because like Anushka, right? Anushka, is that you or Sanjana?
Yeah. Sanjana and me, we both. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have already done one doctorate degree that was about 15 years ago, and another I'm pursuing right now in education. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my own experience with you, my own research, apprehensions and inhibitions with you, and past few years, how I am going about my research and how I'm taking everything. Just to let you know that I'm doing professional doctoral degree in education from European International University, which is facilitated by the Asian College of Teachers. And my topic of research right now is I'm doing a comparative study between the 20th century education and 21st century education. So how is the paradigm shift and what is the paradigm shift. And largely my research is more qualitative in nature. So where I'm now into my final stage of primary research and finding the result and analysis and interpretation of data. And I'm collecting a lot of reviews from my co-educators and fellow colleagues about 20th century education, the COVID pandemic and its impact on education and students, and the current 21st century education, right? So I'm going to share a document with me, which I am referring to for my research. Can I do I think the screen sharing is disabled.
Sanjana, can you make Pooja the co-host?
Made you a co-host, you
Yes,
can
yes,
share
yes.
it.
Right. So is it visible, my screen? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what I have seen is, what I can see is the topics that were shared with me, that largely and roughly everybody has picked up a topic, right? And in different fields and different aspects. And I didn't get much time to research or kind of go through each topic though, but I quickly gave a glance. So there are a few steps to begin with, which I'm sure all of you must have done. So keep on giving me a go ahead so I know where to spend some time and where to quickly move ahead and move forward, right? So selecting a subject, when I'm talking about a subject is different from a thesis statement or a topic or a title, right? So some of you said gender studies, so that becomes a subject. Some, like I am doing it in education, that's a whole subject, or in health or in policy implementation. Those are wide aspects and scopes and subjects. So once you've selected the subject, then you narrow it down to a topic or a thesis statement or a title, right? So for example, I said, I want to now, because I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, and I want to do my second research and second doctoral degree in education. So education became my subject. And then once I was clear with education, then I kind of started zeroing it down and narrowing it down. So as to what in education that I have to do, and mind you, 21st century skills and competencies and pedagogy, everything is so vastly researched already that I sometimes feel that I'm left with hardly any scope for research right now. However, there is so much to do as a primary research. So I've narrowed down my topic into what I want to do as a research design. And then I came up with the 21st century skills and competencies. And I said, okay, let me do a comparison between what has gone by and what is still there and how the future scope of study is going to be. And then stating the objective of the thesis. So what is the main purpose of my research? So the purpose of the research and the objective of the thesis, right? So what is the purpose of the entire research? Is it just for pleasure? Is it, I mean, that you don't have to write as an objective. I should actually have begun with the purpose of the research though. So is it for your earning and livelihood, or to enhance your resume, or to enhance your personal skill? Or is it just for fun and pleasure? Or is it job oriented? So once you are clear with your purpose of the research, then you select the subject and narrow it down to the topic and the objective for the thesis. So it takes a main 3 to 4 objectives of the thesis. And those objectives have to be really wide and clear, right? I mean, like how you do a lesson planning when you're teaching a class, the main intention and the learning outcome. What is your objective of transacting this particular topic? A bibliography is extremely important. Chapters, that is working on the outline, that is what your chapters should look like. Your paper should look like, making up your notes, preparing a rough draft, editing your entire paper under your guide, or making those changes, plausible changes, and writing the final draft. So these are some of those steps that one needs to follow while doing your research, right? So I'm sure all of you must have been through all of this already, and therefore you must have decided upon your topic, upon your objective of the thesis, the statement, and the drafting, taking down of your notes. But if there is any, and the methodology of research, whether it's going to be qualitative or quantitative, depending on that, you will go ahead with your research. But to begin with, is there any preliminary question? Let's take a 30-second pause to see if there is any question in the beginning stage.
If anyone has any queries, please do feel free to ask. It's like an interactive session to clarify all our doubts. So please go ahead.
I'm not too sure if we'll be able to delve into too many advanced stage doubts and queries right now. We can always meet up again. But to begin with, however, if there is none to begin with at this stage, I'll share with you a PPT that again I'm following for my own doctoral research. This is at a very advanced stage PPT actually that I am following, right? Let's see how it can help you people, right? So when we are talking about the various contents of your thesis, the research paper, the various chapters, so we will go into that, I think, once for to begin with. So introduction, literature review, hypothesis, the methodology or the research structure. These are the chapters that primarily need to be followed in a research paper. An abstract has to be there, which is a summary and purpose of the design. An introduction has to be there, which is an overview of and the background of your research paper. A literature review, which talks about the analysis and the reviewing of the content that you're writing. The methodology, how are you going to, what is the strategy of your research? How are you going to analyze the data? Qualitative, quantitative, questionnaire, survey, interview, data, methodology. How are you going to present your data? What are your findings, the results and the findings of each of your research question, the discussion, and then the conclusion followed by appendix and bibliography, right? Now to begin with, is everybody done with your title and thesis statement, the objective and the research questions? So if these three things are primarily done, then only can we go ahead with the other chapters like the abstract, the introduction, the review, the methodology, the results, and the discussion. So give me a thumbs up if there is no doubt in choosing or narrowing down or zeroing down of your thesis statement. Is everybody done with the thesis statement? All right, I have it here with me. I think Abhishek sir had shared it with me. Yeah. The tentative statements. Gender bias in education, right? Somebody is doing it in ecological literacy. Somebody is doing contemporary and relevant pedagogical practices. Okay, that is very similar to and close to what I am doing. Contrasting digital learning environments. Comprehensive impact of extracurricular programs. Youth interest in children's literature. Examining the impact of architectural design. Misusing children for political elections, financial literacy in school, the need of the hour. What does urban youth think about government schools? Okay. Prioritizing mental health, policy to practice. Okay. So, all right. Yes. Are these the title statements, the thesis statements?
Yes, these are the ones. And recently also they have all written a synopsis as well.
Okay, the synopsis. The synopsis also is done. What I would suggest is, this is the personal opinion, of course, and when I was doing my research, extensive research, what I found and felt was that if the thesis statement, like how we have an argumentative statement or a debate statement, instead of making it into a question, if we turn it into a statement, that would give a little more clarity. For example, there were a few questions. What is the ideal infrastructure for education? Now, this is a huge and a vast thing, and this is very subjective. Now, if you look at government schools, they will have no infrastructure, and there is infrastructure for ideal education could be under a tree also. When we were doing pathshalas and gurukuls, and now today we look at technology, right? So maybe Kashish, if you're here.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I think this is yours, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
So my suggestion and my input would be to, so let's discuss the thesis statements first. That if you're saying what is the ideal infrastructure for education, I feel like if I look at from an educator's point of view, and if I have to prepare a question paper, and if I have to put this question, say for about 3 marks, for example, right, in my question paper. So some child may say, and for me, an ideal infrastructure for education is an open classroom under a tree on the carpets, like how it used to be in the gurukuls and the pathshalas, right? Somebody might say the IB schools will say centralized air conditions with a lot of technological use and digital use, right? So all of this will come, but I would suggest that if you could make it a little more, this is very relative and subjective. If instead of this question, if you could turn it into a statement, that brings in the ideal infrastructure for education. If that sounds all right to you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'll work on.
So, for example, do young voters think that education is a political agenda? I would straight away say no. Okay, young voters think, do not think. I think that is Anushka. Anushka, are you here?
So I think it's either Anushka Sharma and Anushka Singh, right? Whose
Oh,
topic
Anushka
is
Singh. Anushka Singh.
Yeah, Anushka Singh.
Right. So this is again a very, this is a very closed statement and a question that will call for a yes, no, and very little. In the sense, do young voters think that education is a political agenda? So yes, young voters think education is a political agenda. Now to get into the whys of it and hows of it, if we bring in a little more statement oriented thesis statement, will give you a more scope for future, for scope for study. For example, will a good score in competitive entrance exam guarantee a good life? Again, if you turn this into an analytical statement rather than an interrogative statement, will bring in a little more scope for study. So I wanted to spend a minute or two into these thesis statements to be able to understand how much scope for analysis, interpretation, and collection and gathering of data and results would it call for. Does that sound of any help, boys and girls and ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, right. Now
Yes, ma'am.
moving ahead to the objective of the thesis. So has everybody formulated the thesis objective? So for example, if you're saying, say for example, we take up the infrastructure, the ideal infrastructure. So this becomes your thesis statement, right? And if you elaborate a little more into the statement, the objective and the research questions. So is everybody done with the objective and the research questions? Say 3 to 4 research questions at least. What are going to be your primary research questions?
Yes, ma'am, we have formulated the objectives, but we are confused with the research questions somewhere.
Okay, so everybody has formulated the objective. So is it all right if we have open conversations? There is no secrecy to it,
Sure, ma'am, no problem at all.
right? No secrets to it, or are we keeping it private and secret? What is it? I'm not too sure.
No, ma'am, nothing like that.
No,
Great.
nothing.
So can somebody, like one of you, maybe read out your objectives, say 2, 3 of you, so we understand, okay, yeah, we're in the right direction. Anybody?
Okay, ma'am, so can I start?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. So my topic is from policy to practice, analyzing the impact and implications of budgetary allocations into Delhi's education system from 2012 to 2022.
All right.
And the objectives are, first, to analyze the trends in budgetary allocations into Delhi's education system. Second, to study how the policies linked to budgetary allocations have been translated into practice at different educational levels. Third, to identify the main challenges in using the educational budget effectively in Delhi. Fourth is to suggest strategies for better implementation of policies.
Okay. Yeah, sounds fine. Anyone else? Would one or two more of you would like to read out the objectives? And then we can move to the research questions.
Hello.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yes. My topic is gender bias in education, examining gender stereotypes within the school environment in India and how it impacts students. So my objectives are to highlight the rampant gender stereotyping which still exists in the Indian school environment, to address the adverse effects of gender stereotyping on young impressionable students, and to offer solutions which can bridge the gap between the genders and promote inclusive equality in school.
Okay. One more person. One more person. To read out the objectives. Anyone?
Ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, so my objective is to know the perception of
No, first tell me your title statement, your thesis statement.
Ma'am, actually, I'm studying on the studying among the school teachers towards the mental health education and their perception knowledge about this mental health education in the curriculum.
Right.
So for that, I'm basically looking forward for the knowledge and perception towards the mental health education, which they can, which that can be introduced in the curriculum.
Okay, now tell me your objectives.
Ma'am, to know the perception and the knowledge towards the mental health education among school teachers.
That's it. So
Yes,
that also becomes your thesis statement, right?
No, ma'am, actually, I have to work on my, I just made my objective only, so I have to work on more on this statement and questions. I'm still working on. I'm not prepared yet.
Okay, so have have your objectives, at least 2 or 3 objectives would be good, because this is a 5,000 word research paper, I believe so. Right, is what I've been given to understand. So
Yes,
at least
yes.
to have 2 to 3 objectives. So for example, when I say that I am doing a research on, the objective is, why? Why are you doing this research, and what is that you want to find out? What do you want to find out, and why do you want to find that out? That becomes your objective, right? And the main question, the why, has to be answered. So for example, that if I talk about the 20th century and the 21st century learning, so I want to find out, for example, what were the challenges in the 20th century and what are the challenges in the 21st century? I want to find out what were the strategies and mode of education used in the 20th century and what are the strategies and mode of education used in the 21st century. I want to do a comparative analysis between the 20th and the 21st century education system. And then I want to talk about the methods of teaching and learning as in the means of solutions and strategies. So I want to primarily dive into the differences, that is the pedagogical differences, the challenges, the needs, and then the solutions and strategies. So there are, and these 4 objectives will also formulate my research questions somewhere around, if I reword them, and will elaborate into my main chapters. Are you trying to understand what I'm trying to say? So your topic should give you enough scope for the objective of the research that you can eventually translate into 3 research questions at least and 5 to 6 chapters at least. right? So who was the last speaker who was saying that is still working on it? Mansi?
Yes,
The mental health and curriculum.
yes, ma'am.
So Mansi, let's just spend a minute in understanding your topic. So when you say what is your topic, come back again.
Knowledge and perception towards mental health education among school teachers.
Okay, so you are talking about mental health education among school teachers. Now, so suppose if I am also the topic that you people have to choose or we have to choose has to leave no scope for confusion at all whatsoever. So for example, now I have a question to ask here of you, Mansi. So when you say mental health education among school teachers, are you meaning to talk about that teachers should take up mental health education as educators, or you meaning to say that teachers should be aware of their mental health, or teachers should be aware of the mental health of the students? So what is it that you're trying to find out? What are you trying to research?
Ma'am, basically, I'm checking that they are trained enough towards mental health education so that they can, educate children also for the mental health.
So you're talking about teachers' awareness about mental health.
Yes,
that
ma'am.
every teacher, every educator should be given some basic knowledge and awareness about mental health to be able to cater to the emotional, social well-being of their own children.
Yes, ma'am. Among the school children.
School, yeah, their own children. I mean to say the school children. So is that the correct understanding that I have?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So that is what. So for that, they need to be mentally aware. They need to be aware of the mental health and the social. So you can talk about, you can probably, I'm not too sure how you will like the idea. So when you say mental health, right, you can also bring in a little bit of social emotional literacy, because mental health eventually translates into and, transpires into social emotional well-being largely, right? So so your objectives then have to be, why do you want to talk about mental health for teachers and for students? Why do you want to train teachers into mental and social emotional well-being and health? What is your major objective? What is it that you're finding, or what is it that you're observing around you and your surroundings that has probably probed you or poked you or provoked you to talk about or to research on mental health education? Why do you want to do this research? What is it that you want to find out?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, the research gap I found is that nowadays the mental health problem is increasing day by day, and and especially the school children who are going through the mental health. This mental health actually people don't consider it as a health. So for that we can introduce a mental health curriculum in the school
So
children's
that
curriculum.
becomes one of your objectives. That becomes one of your objectives in the means of strategy and solution that you're going to suggest.
Yes, ma'am. So that is like actually this curriculum thing is one of the strategy of prevention. I
Yes.
mean, strategy I'm looking forward
Solutions.
so that it can be
Yes.
introduced.
So that you can put in your objective statement also. So the objective statements, in the sense you find out, you talk about the problem, and then you talk about the challenges and solutions, the ways to overcome it. So like you said, that, to find out how mental health is affecting school teachers and children in today's scenario, what are the challenges in social emotional well-being that teachers and school children are facing, to find out and to help teachers understand mental health and then be able to help the school children, and to probably design a small capsule of curriculum on mental health and social emotional learning and well-being.
Okay, ma'am.
So these 3-4 things become your objectives, that you're identifying the problem, because you see a problem, you see there is a problem, right? You see mental health is a problem, and people I mean, these days, thanks to so much of awareness that people are talking, but generally people don't like to talk about mental emotional issues, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
And you find that as a problem, you see that there is a challenge to it, and you want to work towards that challenge, and you want to suggest some remedies and solutions and measures. So therefore, identifying the problem and then talking about the problem and then the remedies and measures and solutions, that becomes your large part of the thesis statement, and then they become your objectives and based on which you can prepare your chapters.
Yes, ma'am. And ma'am, for this study, I'm looking forward for a qualitative study design.
Sorry, qualitative analysis.
Yes, ma'am.
So for that, what is the method that you want to adopt?
I would like to have
Questionnaire.
one interview session with like a few of the teachers. Like I'm
Right.
looking forward for 10 to 12 teachers, and I will
Right.
have a in-person interview with them. And for
Right.
that, I will make a open-ended questionnaire so that and that questionnaire will be, I'll try to have a validated one with the help of our mentors.
Yes.
And the
So-
questionnaires and the interview will be done till that sample size जब तक मतलब मेरे को consistency नहीं मिल जाती answers में.
So it's also, since you're saying that there isn't going to be open-ended questions, you may not get consistency, and it's all right, because that is what I have learned in qualitative analysis and open-ended questions, that because mental health, social emotional well-being is such a vast scope for study that you cannot close it down with your own research only. There will be people who will be doing research after you and beyond you. So leave a little future scope for study, because you cannot close down this topic any which ways.
Okay.
So even if you do not get consistency, and that's all right. Even if you get, even if you hear some people say that, yes, I'm open to talking about mental health and I would love to have a curriculum on it. Fair enough. That is a validated answer. You might get somebody who might say, I'm assuming based on assumption, that why talk about mental health? हमारे time पे कहाँ mental health होती थी? Who was even aware of social emotional well-being? We used to play with friends, we used to be bruised, and we used to get up and we used to dust off and we used to go back to school again. So there was no so much of exposure and scope any which way. So some people might just snub the idea also. So you have to be prepared, and you have to record all the data, the raw data, because there's going to be nothing right and wrong. Since you're doing a qualitative research, it has to, and you yourself said that it will be an open-ended research and there will be open-ended questions. So be it. So even if there was no consistency, 15, 20 interviews that you conduct with a questionnaire and survey, and you can float around a Google form to some people that you know and record their responses, and then you can have an in-person interview about mental health, and then record your data, and then formulate your codes and themes, and planned themes and unplanned themes. There are some things that you might have already had in your mind, but there could be some keywords, some things and some suggestions that might just crop up. So those would be unplanned codes and unplanned themes in your qualitative research.
Okay.
Right?
And one more thing I would like to add, that after this study, I'm expecting that most of the teachers' answers will be that they don't have that much of awareness toward mental health, or they are not trained enough.
That's your assuming. That's your assumption. Now that is where a bias will come in. So when in a qualitative open-ended research, we start having biases that probably might cloud your analysis and interpretation. For example, if you ask me, if you have to interview me, right? So I will say that, yes, Mansi, I am aware of mental emotional well-being. I am an adept, I am a mother also, I'm an educator also. And I have been seeing children struggling with their emotional well-being. And today's era, 21st century, there are conversations about mental health. But yes, the suggestion I like, your suggestion is to include a capsule curriculum into it. Are you understanding what I'm trying to say?
Yes, ma'am.
So therefore, I said, don't look for consistency. You could assume, but assume on both ends that you can get, you might be snubbed, or you might be kind of appreciated, or people might say that, yes, we do not have anything on mental health, or people will say there is so much on the internet, and we have these counselors these days in school. Psychological counselors and life skill counselors. A lot of schools have started appointing career counselors and psychological counselors and in-person counseling. So those avenues are open. Somebody might even say, if you're talking about assumption, somebody might say, भैया हम तो टीचर हैं, हमसे तुम इंग्लिश हिंदी और संस्कृत पढ़वा लो, हम काउंसलिंग नहीं कर सकते.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you understanding what I'm trying to say?
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what I'm finding. That are they like थोड़ा सा भी capable enough कि mental health related counseling they can do.
Yes.
I'm not saying they have to be mastery on that, but a basic knowledge, awareness.
So therefore, have it open-ended. Be open to everybody's response and idea, because that is the raw data that you will be collecting, and that can help you in your defense arguments. However, based on that raw data, try and align that with your own analysis and interpretation and your objective. Don't deviate with this raw data and assumptions and biases. Don't deviate from your own objective of the research.
Okay, ma'am.
Right? So does this conversation help you any bit?
Yes, ma'am. It gives me the clarity, more
Yeah.
clarity towards the topic.
Right?
Thank you,
Right.
ma'am.
Great. Not an issue. Anybody else, like, if we have this one-to-one conversation, and then I can begin with, I can continue with the presentation, because that is going to be largely the same for everybody's research paper, even mine and yours. But if there is anybody else who wants to have this one-to-one conversation and, can give clarity to everybody else also, please go ahead.
Just a request, like, can you go through the overall presentation first, and then we can keep the one Q&A session at the end. So I think everybody will get the overall idea first, and then come up with better doubts if they have. So would that be possible?
Right. So somebody said something, ma'am. Just somebody interrupted once.
Yeah,
Let
like
me
a
hear
special.
that.
It's all right, ma'am. If it's fine, we can talk at the end.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll devote a minute to you.
Okay, ma'am. My topic was what is the ideal infrastructure for education? As you said earlier, that it's a very subjective topic. I mean, some people might have the idea of having gurukuls as the ideal infrastructure and everything. I actually talked with one of our mentors, and that's how we came up with this idea. So basically, I wanted to highlight that what is necessary nowadays and what the things that are shown as necessary, but not really a necessity, like very high-end infrastructures and AC rooms and big sports fields and everything. Like it's just, I feel some of these are just show off, like to attract uh, the parents and everything. So basically, that was my objective to
So my one suggestion to you was to kind of probably, I mean, I don't know what your mentors, I don't want to put you in any quandary or any contradictory position, that what I say and then what your mentors say. But my personal opinion is, it is better if it is in a statement format rather than in a question format, right? One. So when you formulate it into a statement format, and when you say an ideal infrastructure, to generalize this, that ideal, like I said, there will be no ideal consistent thing. So for an IB school, an ideal infrastructure, of course, is centralized air conditions and digital technology and all of that. But for government schools and Kendriya Vidyalayas and Anganwadis, that is a far-fetched dream.
Okay.
So I would rather place the word ideal before education to say that what sort of an infrastructure would provide or cater to an ideal education.
Okay, yes, that sounds better.
Isn't it? So
Yes,
because infrastructure is what? A building? Infrastructure
yes,
is what? Chairs and tables? I can afford, so therefore air conditioner becomes ideal for me, and it's a necessity. Somebody who cannot afford it, it becomes a luxury. So then you will get into the wants versus the needs, the luxury versus the facility, the affordability and the economic status and the social status and all of that. And then you will have to take Anganwadi schools and the Kendriya Vidyalaya schools and the Nagar Nigam schools and the normal elite schools and the public schools and the government schools and then those IB schools. So there are those variety of schools and for every school, the stakeholders are different. Therefore, ideal infrastructure for them will differ.
yes. Okay.
Right? So if I would have to reword it, I would rather say the infrastructure requirements for an ideal education.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'll work on that then.
Yeah, I mean, just a suggestion, just a thought and suggestion. So I will quickly then run through the PPT and let's see how we can, what is of use to you people, right? So these are the chapters that my guide and my mentor has been telling me to work on. So I have the statement, the thesis statement, my subject, thesis statement, objectives. I've prepared my abstract and introduction that's, talking about the problems, challenges, and needs, and then and now one comparison, literature review to review the content, the methodology, the results, which is going to be the primary research based on whether it's qualitative analysis or quantitative analysis, and then discussing the findings, the analysis, and the interpretation, and suggestions for future scope of study, conclusion, appendix, and bibliography, right? So those are citations and quotations and all of that, of course, yes, second stage of it. Now, depending on the purpose and nature of the research, whether it's exploratory, descriptive, and explanatory, and the questions that you need to talk about are the what and the hows and the whys, right? So let's very quickly and briefly talk about these types of research, and then you can see where it fits in your research. So the exploratory research is that talks about that talks about the what's, right? So it is to be concluded around the problem that has not yet been clearly defined, right? And then it talks about to conduct more research on it, go a little more deep into it, and conduct in-depth research later on. So leaves a lot of future scope of study. Exploration, the word itself comes from exploring and exploration, right? The explanatory part becomes to determine the qualitative or the quantitative, the cause, effect, and then explain the relationships, the whys of the research questions. A little more explanatory and experimental in research. The description is the hows, and it will describe the phenomenon, the problem, and the characteristics, but not largely the whys. It will not focus more largely on the whys, right? So these are the basic types of the research. Let's see. So some people were talking about how to talk about the research questions, right? So we said, talk about the broad topic, do a little bit of preliminary research, narrow down the topic to find out your possible and potential research questions, and see whether your research questions are feasible, plausible, interesting, ethical, and relevant to the scenario, relevant to your own topic, to your objective and thesis statement, right? Now, let's look at example of some research questions. For example, how does social media affect people's behavior? So, for example, we were talking about Kashush's question, the thesis statement, the ideal infrastructure, and that kind of struck a little doubt and a lot of questions and queries in my mind as a mentor, as a guide, as an educator, even the mental health problem. So rather than just asking this, talking about the daily use of YouTube on the span of, so you're narrowing it down, you're zeroing it down, you're making it more specific so that your research then bases around that question, and then your findings, your primary research and findings are according, right? So when you're framing a research question, and that is what some of you said, that you're still struggling and you're still framing your research questions, that it has to be refined, it has to be in the current trends, the research study and the technological advances that especially that you are pursuing, concise. It can be long also, concise, but it has to be direct. So that when you're doing your primary research, you have the research question in your mind, and then you come up and analyze and interpret your data qualitatively or quantitatively, depending. Academic integrity, I'm sure everybody knows that what is academic integrity, the due credits to be given, plagiarism, duplicity, dignity, confidentiality, transparency, and all of that needs to be maintained, right? Everybody, I'm sure, is clear with plagiarism. If you want, I can share a few websites with Anushka and Sanjana. They can share it with you, where you can just go on to click on your content to see whether see a few words here and there and a few sentences here and there, but if you're quoting somebody, give them the due credit. If you're picking up from a resource, direct source and a resource, give the due credit. But a few things here and there is not called plagiarism, which is called research. But if you're copying it and pasting it directly and not giving the due credit to the source and resource, then it becomes plagiarism. So these are some softwares to check plagiarism. You can jot them down for it, right? So this is, okay, literature review. This is a primary research. It does not prove any main point. It is just the review of the content, right? A comprehensive summary, a peer-reviewed summary or a mentor-reviewed summary. It surveys a few articles and sources relevant to your topic of research. It should give a theoretical base of and a theoretical insight into what lies, and that should determine the nature of your research primarily, right? And the reader should be clear with what lies ahead. See, with your introduction chapter, abstract chapter, and the literature review chapter, there should be ample clarity, excitement built on already what lies ahead, right? For a further understanding and development. So do you want me to get into the in-depth of the literature review? How should it look like, or should I move on? Sanjana, Anushka?
Ma'am, one of the questions we had collected from the interns was how to write a literature review. So you can give a brief idea on it.
So,
So
so here it goes. All right. So here it goes. How to write a literature review. We'll just go through this slide and see if there is any scope of query or doubt still. So a context for the research. Context for the research, justifying the research, clearing up if there are any misconceptions about the research, right? Then the scholarly articles, if you have read any, if you have read any previous research or based your research on any theories about it, illustrate that how has the subject been previously reviewed, studied, and researched already, if there are any flaws or myths or misconceptions that you found in your own research. I mean, when you were doing anybody else's research or any previous research, you can highlight that. Any gaps that are there, a clearer understanding and knowledge of the fields, and refining the topic, refocusing the topic, and contributing to the evolution of the topic. So like I said, with the abstract, with the introduction, and with the literature review, your thesis statement, your objective should be amply clear, clarified, and viewed by the reader or the committee, that when they're reading it ahead and further, it is only an in detail, in depth, diving into the proper subject. So I'm giving you, say, about a minute or so to go through these pointers. And if still there is any doubt on the literature review chapter, we could discuss that in a minute or so. So give me a thumbs up if whoever had asked the literature review question, are you clear with it, or do you still have any doubts on it?
Ma'am, one doubt.
Yes.
In the research, when we write about the introductory line of what research we are going to do, so how we should distinguish between the what to write in the introduction part and what to write in the literature review, and how specific should be the literature review?
So literature review doesn't have to be very wide and broad. Like I said, you've already written an abstract. So the abstract is going to be the summary of your entire thesis and your thesis statement and objectives, right? So that will give the reader a view about it. Your introduction is an overview of the entire topic with the chapters and research questions and thesis and what the main thesis lies about. Just very brief about the entire topic and statement and the research questions. The literature review is, for example, I said it has to be again brief. It doesn't have to be very elaborate. Depending on the numbers, the number of words and the pages that you're writing, maybe a page or 1.5 page or even 2 pages, where you're talking about clarifying any misconceptions, any flaws of the previous researchers, if you found out any, or if you want to outline any gaps in whatever the researches have been made, and there are any right now, under a clearer understanding of the topic and the broader subject, and then you're refocusing and revisiting and refining the topic, and the topic starts evolving from there, because after that comes your methodology of research, comes into the primary research and results and finding and the discussion, and then comes down to your solution strategies, right? So this is kind of a building bridge between your introduction and your findings, probably, I mean, if in a layman's language, if you say so. Does that help you? Whoever asked that question?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Any other questions? Any other questions regarding this literature reviews? Shall we move ahead then? Yeah. All right. Let's see what lies ahead. So I think we've already spoken about this, right? We've talked about that assumptions, methodologies, conflicting theories. There could be popular theories. There could be, right? So we need to read through all of that. And based on that, we organize our ideas and patterns and what is the most influential theory. So if your literature review is extensive, find notes, cards to organize all your categories and findings, and then decide what is it that you want to put it in. You could also use headings and subheadings, just in case if you feel it is extensive and interesting, right? Purpose, and then write your paper. So I'm skipping too much of, yeah. So research method, let's come to the research method and the methodology. Qualitative and quantitative. In very simple layman language, quantitative is more about numbers, data, statistic, and qualitative is about behavior, emotion, experience, which cannot be quantified, cannot be measured, right? So it is, you dive into them with open-ended questions, close-ended questions to get through interactions, through surveys, interviews, questionnaires, and then you explore, interpret, and analyze because somebody's been through it or somebody's thought is involved in it. You cannot quantify it, you cannot measure it, you can only feel it and then prepare an analytical data on it or an interpretational data on it based on the interactions and interviews and surveys and questionnaires, right? So these are some of the methods that you can do a qualitative research on: case studies, records, observations, focus groups, interviews, questionnaires, and surveys. Quantitative is measured, statistical analysis, how much, how many, how often, to what extent, where that you can quantify and measure. And these are some of the ways that you can do quantitative analysis, right? Where you get data from. So I'm giving you just a minute to read these examples. So if anybody has any doubts with the qualitative and quantitative analysis or research. Right. And there is a mixed method also. So I'm not too sure if anybody is adopting a mixed method. So there could be researches based on qualitative and quantitative analysis, both. So are we also working on hypothesis? Is anybody talking about hypothesis?
Ma'am, I have a question
yes.
regarding method. The mix.
Tell me. Yes, please go on. Who was that? Anushka Sharma, was that you? You could write it in the chat if suppose there is a technical error or something. I have my chat box open in front of me. Please feel free to write on the chat box. Not an issue. Sanjana, shall I move ahead?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Right. So is anybody working on a hypothesis? Or shall I spend a minute here or shall we move ahead?
I think you can spend a minute here on hypothesis.
All right. So a hypothesis is something which is based on a prediction. Like somebody was talking about expectation and assumption. So, but however, hypothesis, expectation, and assumption is different from a personal bias, right? That is one distinction that I would like to make. A personal bias is something that we already have in our mind that clouds our analysis and interpretation and the results and the findings actually. When we are stuck to a certain thought process, and that will then eventually hamper our progress. the findings. However, hypothesis is slightly based on an assumption, expected outcome of the study. So there are certain assumptions that are made by the researcher, and according to the available information and expected information, then we prepare a hypothesis to it. So hypothesis is different from a personal bias, is what I want to clarify on. So mixed approach about policy implementation. I will have to kind of find out on that, but yes, it's very easy. No, why I'm saying so? In the policy implementation, you can have a lot of qualitative analysis based on the interviews, the one-on-one interviews. You can go to authorities and people to find out what is the policy that they're talking about the Delhi education sector, because quite some time back, that was about, I think, 2 years ago, I was approached by the Delhi government, an organization that had a tie-up with the Delhi government. They were implementing some policies in the education sector, and they wanted to train their government teachers primarily, for which they were looking for not just train, but gauge the abilities and the skills and the competencies of the government school teachers, and then to train them ideally. So they wanted to formulate a few policies. So over here, in the policy implementation, the educational policy implementation, I think largely it will be qualitative analysis. I mean, how are you going about it, Anushka? To my understanding, largely it will be qualitative analysis.
Yes, which Anushka was pointing at?
Anushka Sharma, she wrote to me. She's written in the chat. So, what is the larger approach that you are adopting? Anushka, can you hear me?
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yeah.
So, ma'am, I was thinking to do a mixed approach. Firstly, reading the policies, as my topic states that I will be doing a policy implementation and impact check from 2012 to 2022. So, firstly, reading the policies, how the policies have evolved from 2012 to until now, and obviously reading the existing literature reviews and the materials. And then I was thinking to do a qualitative approach for how people back then thought of the policies that were implemented, that were initiated at their time, and now what people think about the changes the policies have. So, can you please guide me? I have not.
Right. So, yeah. So I think that is a fair enough approach to begin with. However, it's already past 8, I think. Personal guidance, is it all right that we connect on a one-to-one basis and then guide you? But yes, a mixed approach can be adopted here in the sense that we can have, you can read the policies and then compare them and see and then in your suggestions, you can make an amalgamated document of the policies, pick the best of it. That could be one of your strategies, solutions, remedies, and suggestions. So that could become a little qualitative in nature, but quantitatively, you can talk about to what extent have these policies per year in the education sector have been implemented and to what outcome. So you can measure that data quantitatively. You getting the point what I'm trying to say? So that data statistic you can measure quantitatively, trying to go to schools and trying to get into the education sector and trying to get into the education policies, that which of those policies and to what extent and how much and where. So, and to what extent, that will give you a quantitative analysis, and qualitatively, the cause and the effects you can find out a little more. What was the impact, effect, challenges, needs, and how far can it be improvised?
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am.
Not an issue.
Hello,
Right.
hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Actually, ma'am, my topic is same like Anushka's, but the difference is she's working on Delhi's budget, and I'm working on the center budget allocation for educational infrastructure. So can I go with the same information that you gave right now? Yeah. May any other suggestions for me?
You're going ahead with center
Central budget allocation.
Yeah, you can also, in the sense, because see, the approach can be the same. Your data will be very different. Your stakeholders will be different. So your approach can be the same. You can talk about the budget allocation in the previous years. We can do a little bit of comparative study, and then quantitatively you come up with the statistics and data like that, and qualitatively the cause and the effect again, and the improvisation. What all can be added can go into your suggestions and remedies and solutions to it.
Okay, ma'am.
Right?
Fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Sanjana, how much time are we left with? Um, can we maybe come back again, because I have to leave, I have to travel early morning and I have to do a lot of packing. But we can spend a little bit on the, let's finish with hypothesis. I'll take question answers very quickly. And then maybe another week or so when I'm back, 10 days later, we could come back again, rejoin, reconvene. In the meanwhile, people can gather their thoughts up and until what we have talked about. Is that all right?
Sure, ma'am, that can be done, I think. But in general, some questions had been previously collected. Like if you could answer
Yes,
those, I
yes.
think it would give a better idea to everyone. Like there were in general more questions about how to present the type of data that has been collected, and like how to do analysis for qualitative data, or how to organize the and present the collected primary
So
data.
qualitative data, qualitative and quantitative analysis and research, we've already talked about. I've given you a kind of a little bit of know-how about it, right? Presentation of data, we will talk about, maybe that's the second stage. So once we are done with the objective, the thesis statement, objective research questions, because for now they haven't even planned out their research questions, which is very important, because until and unless we have a research questions, what is it that we are going to research on? So the research questions are very important, because the primary findings are going to be based upon the research questions actually, right? And then on that, the methodology, whether it's going to be qualitative, quantitative, or mixed, and the hypothesis. And then we come down to the presentation of the data. What is another question?
And ma'am, like somebody had asked that how to choose the type of quantitative research design, whether one should choose experimental or correlational design. So it's a very specific question that was
Yeah.
asked.
Okay. What else? Yeah, that is a very research specific.
And how can we minimize potential biases in our research
That I
design?
talked about. Yeah, that question I had read, and that I talked about, that biases can be, so we need to distinguish between hypothesis and bias. And when we are doing a research, we cannot negate anybody else's opinion based on our own bias. So we will have assumptions, we will have expectations based on our own research statements and research questions and results and findings and research. But then we have to make sure that our biases should not and cannot cloud, hamper another person's opinion, right? So for example, when we were talking about this infrastructure for an ideal education, so somebody might say under a tree, Gurukul, Pathshala, and somebody might say centralized air conditioning. So according to that person, that is an infrastructure ideal for education, and somebody might say कि हमें तो भाई खुले में बैठ करके अच्छा लगता है, छत के ऊपर पेड़ के नीचे बैठ के अच्छा लगता है. For somebody, experiential learning is ideal education. For somebody, rote learning is ideal education, right? So then our bias should not cloud anybody else's opinion, because then our data analysis will be clouded, one-sided, and it will be based on our assumptions and expectations and not on our findings and raw data.
And one question was asked that how to read and interpret tables from articles, means a bit about the literature, analyzing the data from the literature review, I guess. That was the question.
Okay. So that also we can take up in the next session, maybe. That's an advanced stage of research.
Okay, ma'am. I think though the other questions are like related to the data analysis, like the further stages. So I think these were the ones that we had.
So in the beginning stage, for now, the topic, thesis statements, objectives, chapters, abstract, introduction, literature review and hypothesis, bibliography, references, and appendixes. So to begin with, and the methodology of research, qualitative, quantitative, or mixed research. So if we are good to go ahead with this and to begin with this, and most importantly, please have your research questions intact. Speak to your mentors. frame at least 2 to 3 or 4, not more than 4 research questions. 2 to 3 or 4 research questions is a good number. So please frame your research questions, because your primary research and finding and results and data interpretation analysis will be based on your research questions, right?
Sure, ma'am. And ma'am, if you were asking, like, would it be possible for you to share the PPT? Like, it gave a very clear idea, like, it broke down bit by bit, like how to approach the research paper. So, would it be possible for you to share the presentation?
So the entire presentation, I'm not too sure, because this is not, to be honest, it's not my own presentation. Had it been my own presentation, I would have shared it. It's also been passed on from me, but let me share whatever I can with you. Not an issue.
Sure, ma'am, that would be great.
I will do one thing. I will share that document with you, and whatever documents I have come across and found out, I will surely share it with you. And if this presentation I'm able to share, I will. All right.
Sure, ma'am, that would be great.
Right. Anything else for now in this past 1 hour of conversation that we had talked about? Is there anything else that has come up? Is there any clarity?
If anybody has any queries or any comments to share, then please go ahead, so that we can gradually conclude today's session.
And then maybe another week or 10 days later, we can meet up again for the advanced research methods. Right? I think none. So I think we can call it a day.
And if anybody has any feedback to give, like, we would like to collect feedback about how they like the session. So if anybody has any comments to share, please go ahead.
I think largely only 3-4 of them spoke. I'm not too sure if everybody is there also or not.
Anushka, Mansi, if any of you have any feedback to share, Kashish, so we can take that up and then conclude today's session.
Mansi, Kashish, anything to say?
Yes, ma'am. The session was good. We got a clarity towards my research objective question, a lot of things. So just one more thing, that we can have a good, more good time with you, and have a more session with you, so that we can have a research class.
Not an issue. That we can do maybe once I'm back from my trip, a week or 10 days later, right? So then we can talk about the advanced methods of research, or the advanced stages of research. Not an issue. Thank you so much. I think, Sanjana, we can call it a day. We can let them go to grab their dinner.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you, everyone.
All
for
right.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your
Thank
time.
you.
We
Not
would
an
like to have further discussions with you soon.
Sure. Pleasure. Anytime. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming in. Bye-bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.